feel like that. I feel like for the first like 6 months, it was almost like, all right, I just kind of like coasted, like I'm just like numb. Like I don't feel anything anymore. It's like I went from a color TV to a black and white TV. That's what life felt like. That's really what it felt like. And then now,
Wow.
and then now that it's 2 years later, now it's like I almost feel everything. And when I see things, it's the reality of her not coming back into this physical world, that she isn't going to have another Christmas. I'm not going to have another birthday with her. I'm not, it's like those things hit so much more, that my future isn't with her than it is looking back and like, oh, she was sick. And, oh, looking back on what I did have, it's looking at the future and what, um, it's not going to be what it was. My life isn't the same anymore. So you're grieving so much more than the person. You're grieving yourself too, essentially. Say thank you, Vicki, so much for letting me come on to this amazing podcast. It's close to Mother's Day. This is my second Mother's Day that's going to be without my mom here in the physical world, as I like to call it. She passed away June 18th of 2022. Just to give a little bit of like a background story of the way everything kind of panned out as far as the trajectory of her life. She went in for what she thought was a urinary tract infection, and it actually turned out to be a stage 4 uterine cancer diagnosis. And she ended up passing away in 3 months. They gave her 6 months, and she passed in 3. So she was somebody that was the most independent person I've ever met in my life. She passed away at 66. She was somebody that was carrying 24 packs of Poland Spring waters up to her apartment by herself. She lived by herself, just her and her Persian cat Topaz. So there's a couple things that I don't want to say excited to talk about, but I think that need to just be addressed overall. One of those things is preventative medicine and just preventative care overall. So thank you for giving me a platform to talk about that. I also just want to talk about the transparency of grief and just being able to speak about that openly, because it's something that everybody goes through, whether it's grief from losing somebody, whether it's grief from a relationship. As human beings, we're constantly going through endings and new beginnings. And I don't think that we really have a way to navigate that. Nobody prepares us for that. So I'm really appreciative for this opportunity. And so just going back to who I was before my mom passed away, the person that I was. So when I reflect back on the person that I used to be before my mom was here, I would really just have to say, I think the biggest change that I've seen is really divulging more information to people. And because the relationship with my mom was my everything, I was constantly I think I talked to her 3 or 4 times a day. She was a substance abuse counselor, but she was also just a regular counselor. She was an amazing person just to talk to on a regular day basis. The kind of person that you could call up and have 3 to 4 hour conversations with, and she would care about every single aspect of your life, as mothers do. That's kind of like their role. They care about if you're putting what kind of seasoning did you put on that chicken? Just the stupid things that know her, and I grew up with her, and as a single mother, it was just me and her for the length of my lifetime, my childhood, middle school, into high school. It was just me and her for that whole time. So going from that transition into just it being over, that was a huge time of reflection onto myself of who am I without my mom? It's like, who am I without her feedback? Without, I mean, everything that I did really came down to, what was that? How does this shirt look? Is that, what should I, should I apply for this job? Should I move to this location? And when you don't have that feedback anymore, it's very, very strange because everything's kind of up to you now, like every single thing. I've always been an independent person by nature, but uh, I would always consult her about everything. So that was a very large proponent in my life that I just didn't expect. Um,
Mhm.
that nobody could ever really prepare you for, that silence and that level of just, I think grief has a lot of loneliness to it for the fact that not being physically lonely, but because you're the only person that has that direct experience with another person, um, they're the only one that can relate to them on that specific wavelength.
Right.
So nobody else has had that same relationship. I didn't have that same relationship with my mom. My sisters had a different relationship. My dad, everybody had a different relationship with her than I did. So they couldn't compare their grief to my grief. And that's where
Well,
the line
right. Everybody grieves differently,
differently. Yep.
and it's interesting that you say that because my mother actually has talked a lot about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, about the fact that, like, when her father died, for example, each of her sisters, everybody kind of grieved separately and
Yes.
alone, even though you're together in that room.
Mhm.
There's things happening individually by you're alone in it too. You're together, but you're not together, and you don't realize it till it's actually happening to you. What that actually feels like. There's not a really an easy way to prepare yourself for those things. There's not. I mean, there's
Yeah.
only so much though that you can do, because I think, and tell me how you dealt with this, because you said your mom died in 3 months.
Mhm.
You probably thought you were preparing yourself, and then when it actually happened, you probably felt very differently than what you thought you were going to feel. Is that accurate?
Yes, that's very accurate because hospice came in, and thank God for. I mean, I hospice is such an incredible organization, and
Hmm.
their whole motto of their organization is, "We're not here to help you die. We're here to help you live," and that was such a beautiful thing to hear from healthcare professionals because until that point, it was just kind of a dead end road of, yeah, you're terminal. We can't really help. Yeah, no, yeah, you're terminal. That's it. Like, and that hopelessness of just not being able to get better. I mean, my mother was just a warrior. She was an abs like she was just like, this is how it's supposed to be. This is, if this is my fate, like I'll fight, but we're gonna live out these days happy till it's the last. And I came to terms with the fact that she was going to pass, but I've also never dealt with grief before. And so that was very difficult too, because no matter how much I thought I could expect, I wouldn't expect the things that I could even imagine. Um,
So you never had somebody close to you pass away before in
correct,
your life.
correct.
Had you ever attended a funeral service or a wake or anything like that?
I think I
Memorial?
went to maybe one. I think, and that was the thing. And
Wow.
I remember saying that to her. I'm like, this is my first like real experience with, dealing with, I'm like, and it's going to be you. I'm like the person that is
Yeah.
close to me in my life. Like, and she would, it was very strange because we were both in limbo. It's like we were both in limbo. When you get diagnosed with, any terminal illness, it's you're not waiting. I mean, everybody is human beings. We're all here for, we don't know how long we're here for.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
but when you're kind of given that morbid clock, so to speak, it's a big reality check into what really matters and what doesn't anymore. I just
Hmm.
remember I just remember so vividly, something as small as her being able to digest food and then taking for granted, like thinking about how often I've taken for granted my life, like being obsessive about losing weight. It's like, why did I care so much about, losing weight when all she possibly would ever want to do is just swallow this cracker. It's like the things that we take for
Hmm.
granted every single day, small motor skills or being able to walk or being able to drive a car. It's like, and that all changed
And
within such a short period of time.
so
Finding your own
that
way of grieving is really, really important. The way that I've really found, releases in movement and in dance and, somatic healing exercises, because grief does physically get stuck inside of you. It does. Like if you're not moving and the depression and the sadness, it gets stuck in there. And that's something that I've, personally found that's helped me. Well, talk therapy and things like that really do help people. I think there will be a space for, myself at some point. um, Traditional ways aren't always the best. And I think that there's so many other holistic ways, whether that's, wanting to honor the person that's passed away with something that they've loved to do. My mom loved poetry. She loved writing. So I make sure to, either always read a line of her poetry. I'm going to get it laminated and posted in my new house, or, whether they loved gardening, cooking, keeping their spirit and the person that they were alive in that way is really how you honor the person that they were. Being comfortable with being a little more vulnerable too, um, would be probably be my best advice too.
yeah, and that's a hard thing, that vulnerability for a lot
Mhm,
of people,
mhm.
um, especially with something so raw. You
Yeah.
know, that's such a raw thing to experience, especially because you were in a situation, you were very close to your mom.
Mhm.
You talk to her every single day, and you go from that to nothing,
Yeah.
and you go through a traumatic downhill spiral with your mom's cancer diagnosis,
Yep.
and you're slowly watching this person that you're closest to in your life kind of slowly disappear
Yeah.
little by little.
Mhm.
Um, that's what I imagine in my mind. I'm not sure if my description is accurate, but that's, to me, that's what it translates to if you're talking about the emotional side of things.
There was a couple of things where it was very sudden, so it was very unexpected, but at the same time it was a roller coaster ride, because you go on these upheavals of, oh well, maybe, maybe it could be get chemotherapy, maybe we could do this, oh no, no, that won't work, oh well, maybe just a little bit of hope, maybe we could call, Sloan Kettering and they would have upgraded technology that we could possibly, and it's like, no, no. So the level of the level of exhaustion, um in and that was just for 3 months. I mean, people go through these things for years and years and years, which I just can't even imagine with children. And I mean, my mom would
Yeah.
even talk about that. It's just so important to be mindful of life, like mindful of every single second. So while she was slowly withering, but she wasn't. It was a day to day thing. Some days were great, and then some days were she would be in bed all day long and she couldn't, get up. So you'd get those little glimmers of hope, you would also get those down times too, where it's just like, oh, this isn't gonna pan out how we want. And that was the I don't like to use the word mind fuck of it all, but honestly, it
Mhm.
was. It really was the mind fuck of it all, because you hold on to hope constantly. I mean, we always do. We want to hold on to any little bit of happiness or glimmer of hope that we possibly can. And um, That's what we did though. You have to. That's what gets you through every single day. If you don't have that, you don't make it through. And I'm actually thankful for that, looking back on it now. Before, when it first all happened, I was like, oh, I was so naive. Why did I think that she was going to get better? Why did I think that she got a terminal like diagnosis? Why did I think that she was going to get any better? But now I'm very thankful for it because um, it was the reality. And at the same time, we knew we could stay hopeful, but also live out her days as she wanted. So you only can do what you're in control of, and that's all we had control over.
Wow.
She didn't get to do as many of the things that she wanted to do because, again, she was a single mom, and you know, she didn't get to do what she wanted to do because of financial reasons a lot of the time. But I also think that she was taken divinely to do a lot of blessings too, because there was a
Mhm.
lot of blessings after she passed. A lot of things that I'm a very spiritual person, that I feel happened after her passing. But every moment with her was very magical. Every like We had nothing, but we had everything at the same time. Like, we grew up just me and her, and a lot of the times it's just her in her very small little tiny apartment, and we were just fine with that. It was like that with growing up too. And I tell that to my niece, my nephew. It's like, it doesn't matter where you go or what you do. It's You can make any house a home as long as it's filled with safety and love. That's all that matters. That's really all that matters at the end of the day, whether you're living or dying, because we're all living and dying every day,
Right.
you know?
Right. Yeah. Tell me more about the some of the healthcare aspects of this and what you had to kind of deal with my understanding is that it was ridiculous.
I just had always had this very naive thought in my head, that the sicker you are, the better care that you got. And that is just, well, from my experience, my mom's experience, I mean, it just wasn't the case. Um, Once she found out she had that abdominal mass, then she had to go and get it tested to see if it was cancerous. And it was. And then from there, she had to go see a specific gynecological oncologist. And all of this, by the way, took a substantial amount of time in between. Like, there were weeks in between where this mass was growing and pushing pressure onto her bladder, where she wasn't able to have bowel movements. And it was very, very uncomfortable for her. So,
How large was this mass?
yeah, it was like like size of probably like this big. I mean, it was big, and it kept growing,
Wow.
metastasizing it
Wow.
all over her body. So I just never understood too, why, if something's suspicious of that, why immediately don't you have this trajectory of going from there to immediately get that test, to the cancer center, to here. It was just so long, and the referrals that you need. I mean, if I didn't help her, or for anybody who doesn't have help with any of their health information, I thought about, elderly people and people who aren't tech savvy. I mean, you have to get referral after referral. And she was coming from Vermont. She moved from Vermont to New York. So all of her, we had to go to Vermont to go to her primary care doctor. And the oncologist didn't want to prescribe pain medications. And it was a crazy, crazy experience. And it wasn't until hospice came in that we really, really felt like, yes, she's a human being. She's a person, and she matters. It was, if somebody is at a certain stage of their life, they're at a certain stage of their life. And also, as far as clinical trials go, we tried to get clinical trials. It wasn't, she had to have a, certain gene type. She had to have been on chemo for a certain time. She had to have all these different qualifications to even get a clinical trial sent to the door. But, you know, she could get every other pain medication under the sun from hospice care. So it's tough. It's tough because they get, they I like to say they'll help you die, but they won't help you live all the time.
Right,
You know,
right.
it shouldn't be so simple to get all of those pain medications, yet not as simple to get clinical trials when the reality is the reality at the end of the day. And if you have a terminal illness, you have a terminal illness. Doesn't, you know, whatever you're going to take, you're going to take. Um, and if it's going to help somebody, and that was the thing, is she's like, I know what's going to happen if this clinical, you know, if the clinical trial, at least if I know it might help somebody, why can't I take it? And I never
Right.
understood that. I never understood that.
Yeah, it's heavily gate kept,
Yeah,
and maybe for the wrong reasons.
right, right. I
I mean,
just
I don't really know. I have no idea, but
right.
it doesn't sound right on the surface. You know,
Yeah.
I don't have the the background or the experience to know for sure, but it just doesn't. It just sounds terrible. It just sounds.
Yeah, yeah, I mean,
This
she was
is something that potentially could have extended her life.
exactly, and that's what she said. She's like, you know, at the end of the day, maybe, you know, she joked about it. She's like, maybe it'll kill me faster, but at least you'll know that this drug will kill somebody with uterine cancer faster at the end of the day. You know, and that's the research.
Right, right.
I can say that I at least help somebody in the, you know, in that situation that don't, you know, rule out this drug for this type of, you know, at least it'll go towards scientific exploration for this kind of cancer diagnosis that I have. And that was very frustrating too. So there was a lot of things along the way that it was a huge reality check that I just questioned. It's like, why? Never
Yeah,
understood it.
yeah. Um, Now that your mom went through cancer and all that, are you personally concerned more so about your own health in the future?
Um, I um, I'm more concerned just about like I'm very pro preventative anything. I you know, if any of my friends or family members or anything, if you have a cough and something like sounds off, I'm like, get it checked, get anything checked. I mean, I would have never thought in a million years. I mean, I would. My mom was a smoker, and I would have thought lung cancer, something like that. But I would have never imagined something like a stage 4 cancer diagnosis, something that literally she went in for a UTI for. So for my own health, I am just a proponent not for, you know, specifically, you know, the uterine cancer because it is, um, you know, specific to her. My grandmother also had ovarian cancer too, so I definitely make sure to get, you know, all that checked. But I think it's very interesting that they change pap smears for women for to every 5 years instead of every 2 years. So it's like just that preventative care, and same with prostate exams too. They change
Mhm.
prostate exams, so it's not as often. It's like, but why? You know, so I just say to everybody, get as many tests if they ask you for anything, whether it be something as, you know, like cancer or whether it be, you know, hepatitis, HIV, thyroid. I mean, anything, blood work, get it done. Why not? It's important,
Right,
you know,
right,
it's important.
right. And that's, you know, the big debate in the country today about, you know, health insurance and if it should be
Yes.
socialized or not,
Mhm.
and that's a whole other component to this. Again, could be
Yeah.
another podcast just on that aspect of the system and
Yeah.
having access to the care to
Yes.
begin with.
Yep.
Um, so that's something that's also really important. And
Absolutely important.
so tell me more about your mom. You know, who was she?
She was everything. She was a ball of light. She was a I'm just looking around at all of her stuff. I live her stuff all over the place. So, in a nutshell, Bonnie Lynch, to describe Bonnie Lynch, and it's so funny because I've actually thought about this question a lot, like how to explain to somebody who's never met her before. she was somebody that could literally walk into a room and make you feel so unbelievably comfortable. It didn't matter who you were. You could be, I like to use the comparison of, you could be the hardcore motorcycle dude at the bar, or you could be, the upstanding lawyer from New York City. She could connect with anybody. It was magical. It really truly was. And she just cared about people from like the core of her soul. She really did. She was somebody who was so empathetic, so kind, so loving, but extremely powerful too. She had this duality about her that was extremely magnetic. And that is something that is very difficult because I know it's not replaceable. It's not something that a lot of, nobody has, or
Those
yeah,
qualities.
nobody has those traits of being able to um just kind of switch it up. And it's because she had dealt with so much in her life. She had dealt with the loss of a child. She moved, dozens and dozens of times. She lived in multiple areas. Um and I just looked up to her for everything. She had great style. She was funny as hell. My friends loved her. Um, and she never listened to the rules, which I love too, in all the best ways possible. I mean, they told her not to paint her apartment. She'd be like, screw that. I'm painting my damn apartment. The next day, she had her apartment in turquoise, like just full turquoise. She had everything in her room paint like pink. And like, how do you like this? And how do you like that? So, it, I mean, she was 66, but really, I mean, in all respects, she was like a 30-year-old, but she was as wise as a 70-year-old, struggling for the underdog, for people who went through hard times, and she could really connect with anybody. So, in that way, it's just a magic person. I'd like to say she's a magic human being. On to the better. And she was so honest too, which I love. And moms are, which we forget about too. It's like, who else is
Mhm.
gonna tell you that, just like just because it fits doesn't mean it fits. You know what I mean? Like like who else tells you those things? But in like the most loving ways possible.
I feel like your relationship with your mom was very unique and very special and very different from most people that I know, anyways.
Yeah.
You had a particular closeness. You put your mom before anything and everybody else on the planet.
Yeah. When she first passed away, I kind of felt like a sense of relief, honestly, because she was going through such hell. With that abdominal mass pushing down, and she couldn't, go to the bathroom. She was so tired and lethargic. And when somebody's that sick and you see them that sick, you have a minute where you're like, like, oh, like it's that you don't want to have relief. I didn't want her to go. I mean, God, I didn't want her to go at all. But you kind of have like that minute where you're like, wow, she is at peace. Um, so when you come to terms with that and you're kind of like at peace with that for a little while, and my sister lost her father before, we have different dads. She told me that there's like this little bit of time that you're kind of numb to it all, which I did feel like that. I feel like for the first like 6 months, it was almost like, all right, I just kind of like coasted, like I'm just like numb, like I don't feel anything anymore. It's like I went from a color TV to a black and white TV. That's what life felt like. That's really what it felt like. And then now,
Wow.
and then now that it's 2 years later, and now it's like I almost feel everything, and when I see things, it's the reality of her not coming back into this physical world, that she isn't going to have another Christmas. I'm not going to have another birthday with her. I'm not It's like those things hit so much more, that my future isn't with her than it is looking back and like, oh, she was sick, and oh, looking back on what I did have. It's looking at the future and what it's not going to be what it was. My life isn't the same anymore. So you're grieving so much more than the person. You're grieving yourself too, essentially. Yeah.
Wow. That is a very profound thing that you just said. You said that you're not just grieving the person, you're grieving yourself.
Yeah.
And I think that's really the biggest part of this that a lot of people miss or don't realize is that it part of yourself is gone with her in a way.
Yeah. Hmm.
And now it's up to you. How are you going to move forward? How are you going to live? How are you going to build your life from here on out?
Yeah. Yeah. I ended a 7-year relationship. I mean, everything became so urgent after. It was just like, you don't have time. There's no time. Like life is so fragile. I don't, again, it being my first time with even experiencing this, I mean, grief at all. So it's just, you have no time to live in unhappiness in any way, shape, or form because that wouldn't be honoring her life. All she wanted was another day. How could you possibly live in an unhappy relationship? How could you possibly take advantage of, your life or not make boundaries for people who are taking advantage of your time and your good, you know, the goodness that you have to give and the positivity and any of that. And that's not just with intimate relationships, that's with friends and family. Anybody who takes advantage of that, just that they had to go. It was so unapologetically just had to happen. And, I lost some people because of that. And I, it's just a reality that happens, I think, when you go through something like this. It's almost like you have a microscope and it's like, okay, what isn't important in life anymore, and who doesn't deserve your time because time is short. Grief is also something that a lot of people don't want to listen to, or not even don't want to listen to, but don't know how to respond to it. So it's very uncomfortable for people to talk about it. So I think that journaling and writing things down is a great way to get everything out of here and onto paper.
Too, that as far as what we're supposed to talk about and what we're not supposed to talk
Yes.
about and what we're supposed to keep quiet about as
Right.
far as the emotions and the issues that go on, we're we're doing a disservice as a society to people, to everybody, because what what's put out there about this and how it actually goes down is not the same.
Yeah.
You know, it's
Yeah.
it's much different and I'm not sure why nobody wants to have the conversation. Maybe it's just too hard for people, or they're because we don't promote enough, you know, talking about emotions,
No,
you
we're
know,
so
in
scared.
a healthy, good way. You know, we're doing it kind of all backwards right now in this society. It's like, you know, everybody's triggered by something, right? And so everything's hush hush. Everything is, you know, the opposite of what it should be. And the reality is we should be saying more. And actually it is okay to be triggered sometimes,
Yeah.
because you have to sit in that and go through it and learn how to cope.
Hmm.
And that skill is highly lacking in our current society, especially among young people, because you know they're all upset about the littlest things. Well, what's going to happen when something real happens? Something that actually has, you know, validity and is life changing.
Yeah.
So I think it's really important that we continue to do this, and maybe other people will come forward and want to talk about it. I don't know. I'm not sure what will come of it, but hopefully something positive, even if it just helps one person.
just wanted to say hello and let you know that I just got released from the hospital late yesterday afternoon, and it's a very good day today to be home. We kiss the ground and we walk on when we get home. And my oldest daughter, Dana, is with me, and she brought me homemade chicken noodle soup, and we've been hanging out and laughing and talking and just rebounding from all the procedures and everything you go through when you're at the hospital, especially at Easter. So I thank you for your prayers. I thank you for just helping me along on this journey I'm battling. It's all going to come out good. So take care.